devotion to a charismatic leader, but like that is an aspect of a cult in and of itself, right? Frequently
Right.
characterized by mass media propaganda. So again, like this is just another word for like cult
Yeah.
behavior, authoritarianism. I feel like it's a bit of not tautology. Maybe the wrong.
No,
But
I'm,
like
I'm with you on that.
it's a bit redundant to say cult of personality because cults almost always have a charismatic leader because
Yeah.
they have to have willing followers, and if that then expands into like authoritarianism, that's a separate thing entirely.
Right. Hi, Doggy Licious. Welcome in,
Hello, hello, hi.
lady. Um, yeah, I think so. I've gotten some conflicting kind of
Mm-hmm.
takes in my research about whether or not the charismatic leader is a necessity in defining a cult.
Mm.
Because so one of the takes
Mm-hmm.
was lots of these cults are led by fear. It's almost actually that's a very common part of cults is to use fear as a tactic. So lots of times the leader is not leading out of like charisma and the ability to get people to listen to you. It's the fear of what will happen if you don't listen to them. So in that way,
Yeah.
that was one of the takes. And then the other one is depending on what your definition of cult is, there's lots of things that don't really have a charismatic leader, but check every other fucking box. And do we not call that a cult because it's doesn't have a charisma? Like, is Amway or any of the MLMs that exist a cult? I don't think
Yeah.
that I don't think I could name a single leader, maybe Mary Kay of Mary Kay Cosmetics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, and I would consider most of the strong MLMs to be about as close to a cult as you could get without
Yeah.
being one, if not outright a cult. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're like I think people compare MLMs and cults because they have that similar thing. I mean, you could say any like strong corporate presence where they have an emphasis on
Hmm.
like you being integrated and identifying with their brand, and that kind of could have is
Hmm.
like utilizing cult tactics essentially. So like if for instance people who worked at Tesla, like we all know like Tesla's run by Elon Musk, were like being
Hmm.
forced, and again, maybe they are, I have no idea, are being forced to like attend Tesla parties and interact with Tesla this and like participate in like a social way, and like dissent is never like permitted or allowed, that would like probably qualify as a cult essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I guess does it need to be a cult for coercive control and like kind of diabolical persuasion to be bad? I don't know that I need it to hit every requirement for it to be formally defined for me to be like, that's not okay. Don't love that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like
Hmm.
it's an important thing to be able to define, but it is not a necessity for me to be able to just spew hatred about it,
Yeah.
frankly.
One of the things that I so to reference what you were saying about um it being like led by fear, I feel like at first, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think at first we like see that it's being, sorry, back up. Okay. I think that it at first that you have to like be invested. I think there has to be some
A
level of
hundred
investment,
percent.
right?
Yeah.
And so like I do agree that the fear can come probably at a later
Hmm.
point, but
Yeah.
essentially like the psychological aspects that pertain to a cult are like all hitting on different aspects of this like hierarchy of needs. So I'm like showing like
A
this is
hundred
referred to
percent.
as
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I mean, physiological needs, no, but that's like food and water. Like maybe there is. Maybe like you have like that's how you get food and water is through this mechanism, but
Hmm.
that's less common, I would say.
Yep.
Um Safety. So often that cults create this sort of like us versus them mentality. And when we're seeing with
Absolutely.
what we see with like MAGA and Christian nationalism is it's often like portrayed as this like there's a word I might be pronouncing this wrong. Manichean dualism. I don't know if you're, which
Nope.
is it's the fight of light versus dark essentially, which is like at the
Okay.
center
That's how
of
very
like
Harry Potter of them.
yes,
It's funny that you talked about Maslow because I also have Maslow in my notes from,
I love
like,
that.
one of the stages, because there's this attachment theory, which I
Yes.
think you mentioned just in our
Mhm.
discussions about this offline, that, like, a lot of cultism is based on kind of, leveraging attachment, and that one of them is making it so that their entire support network and all of their needs are
Yeah.
serviced by the cult, and that they're taught to believe, at least, that they get them serviced outside of the cult, and that that's antithetical to them getting
Yes.
their needs met.
So yes, so like the leader has like stated that they will like meet their needs in this specific way.
Mhm.
And that was also really the only thing I found that was like a vulnerability of like how these become dismantled is that that
Mhm.
leader ultimately doesn't make those promises, like those promises don't come
Yeah.
to fruition. So
Yeah.
and then you that's how like followers leave and then it, everything kind of collapses after that. But
Right.
it there's yeah, so it's like we this hierarchy of needs is like essential, and I love that we both hit on this phenomenon because I
Right.
think that it's central and it's they all play on each other, right? So like you
Mhm.
eventually your identity becomes involved in this like
Yeah.
in group. So safety, we start to say out group evil, out group is bad. We have to fight out group. They're threatening us.
Yeah.
I knew TGIF stood for thank gay.
Think gay,
The
it's
gay agent.
Friday.
What is I don't know. The chat is geeking me right now. Gay agent, a party a bit harder on Fridays.
Mhm. I love this.
And love and
I'm not
belonging.
saying that.
Love and
Yeah.
belonging. You have identity with this in group faction, and then
Yeah.
esteem and self actualization is like you receive love through the cult um
Well, not
and
even that.
yeah.
Sometimes they curate this idea of a higher power, and there's
Yes.
usually some sort of there's like a 8 category thing by one of these like famous cult researchers, but one of
Mm-hmm.
them is this sacred science, and it doesn't need to necessarily be religious, but it is something about like your true self or your
Yes.
real family or some sort of like nebulous and unfalsifiable thing that you're supposed to be achieving that can only be achieved through there. So it's not just your own self-actualizations need that exist in reality. They also create false
Yes.
self-actualization
Yeah.
needs within the cult.
Yeah, and I was
Just
gonna
wild.
say, and like I'm sure that because it's hierarchical, there's probably promotion within that system, MLM style, where you you know
Mhm.
what I mean? You can move up if you like reach
Yeah.
this level of spiritual enlightenment or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And again, yeah,
That
I
you can
think
become
that
daddy god or whatever.
yeah, you want to become super daddy god, granddaddy god.
I genuinely believe that there was something like that in that cult. It's so fucked. So fucked.
um, but shit, what was I gonna say?
I'm
this is
sorry.
it's the ADHD. I lose my train of thought like this. It's gone. It's
Yeah.
gone. It flew away. Yeah. You like can obviously be move up and like advance in that space and self actualize and help me out here, Alicia. What was I gonna say?
You can move up, but you can never peak. Like they
Yes.
design it so you can never peak. There is
Yes.
no end, because
Yeah.
then if you met that, then they would
Hmm.
be proven wrong
And sorry, and
in they wouldn't be able to deliver, I
yes.
guess.
And it's intentionally vague and nebulous so that it's impossible to challenge with like outside info essentially. So like that
Yeah.
is another piece is that cults like they information is privileged and you only receive it through one source essentially and they tell you
Yeah.
to disbelieve everything that is not from this one source or this one, channel essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And it's
Yeah.
oh,
I feel like you really love like the group think and the in group out group aspect of like the cult stuff. So is that like something you like
I
dug
mean,
into more or
I mainly was looking for, like, the research I was looking at was trying to find some actual brain science about persuasion, how persuasion works, and what kind of, particularly as it pertains to like political ideologies, how easily can your mind be changed when you're what makes you susceptible versus not susceptible, and how susceptible are you when you're in a suggestible state, what gets you there,
Mm-hmm.
and those sorts of things I thought was really important. And also I thought it was interesting, the kind of attachment theory of it, where it's like, even if they don't isolate you from another group, like physically or literally through like,
Mm-hmm.
telling you to excommunicate them and being like they're a toxic person or whatever
Yeah.
Scientology says, what a lot of the political kind of rhetoric is will be just to discredit dissent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
instead of necessarily being like, okay, you're not allowed to watch mainstream news, it's like, well, you can watch mainstream news, but you know those guys are all liars, right? Like, you know that Anderson Cooper's a billionaire, so he's not on our side, and like, that sort of
Yeah.
thing, which I mean is a lot easier to swallow than
Mm-hmm.
you're not allowed to blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? If you convince someone that that isn't a valid source of information, and you tell them, here is a valid source of information, again, like you just said, it all comes from within the cult, then you kind of build a self kind of fulfilling loop of distrust external sources, trust internal sources, up to and including the self is apparently an important part of it as well,
Yes.
to
Yes.
discredit your internal narrative and any doubt, and usually to appeal to this kind of superstitious or supernatural kind of, what do they call it, something science, what is it, sacred science, to appeal to what they call sacred
Oh.
science, where they're saying, oh, that doubt in you, that's, I don't know, whatever, like Satan in
Yeah.
Christianity, which I'm not necessarily referring to as a cult, but at its extreme end, whenever you feel doubt, that's blah happening,
Mm,
and you just
yes.
need to
Yeah.
turn back
Just
towards.
believe. Just believe.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
or if you're judging what someone else is doing, I'm doing this because I was called upon. If the leader is getting, called out doing something questionable, and it
Yeah.
builds, it's an infallible system because it's unfalsifiable,
Yeah. No,
right?
I completely agree, and I think that that sort of leads to like self-censorship, right? Because dissent is like the things that makes this thing fall apart, right? So it's like, how
Yeah.
do we absolutely 100% just like stamp down dissent in all
Hmm.
forms, right? So
Yeah.
um self-censorship through that mechanism of, oh, I have something wrong with me because I am dissenting, but also self-censorship, I really like in a like social context, right? Was something that I came upon that I thought was so interesting, of like that people may not actually like believe in what is going on, but because of
Hmm.
social desirability bias, like they have connections within this cult, they will just not
Yeah.
say that they disagree, and it was more in the context of authoritarianism, right? Where like you'll just kind of go along to get along, essentially, and just not outright
Absolutely.
disagree in a verbal manner. And I mean,
Absolutely.
in that still contributes to this like hierarchical leadership, like because
A
you're not
hundred
dissenting.
percent.
Yeah.
Well, and consider the fact that like people are very bad estimators of their own behavior, right? Like, how much was polling in 2016 telling us that Donald Trump was going to win? 0%, right? Like, everyone was like, no, Hillary's going to blow him out of the fucking water. All the polling, data, whatever. And it wasn't because that data is false. It's because people are reluctant to say something that they believe is an unpopular opinion that is 100% data backed. And their behavior will
Mm-hmm.
only follow what they're saying if it isn't a safe and secretly protected behavior, which thank God voting is. But you can go into a voting booth and you can say to your husband, wife, and friends that you voted Hillary and go in and vote Trump.
Yeah.
And there's no recourse for that, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's 100% true. It reminds me of something that I am blanking on. I saw it was a video on the internet. It might have been a podcast interview where it was with an individual who was like a reporter for like a reputable newspaper. And essentially she had done this like investigative reporting with essentially like an incel, like manosphere incel community.
Mm-hmm.
And in that they like had they essentially like presented themselves like it was like a group of men who she found through a dating app who presented themselves as like liberal individuals on the outside,
Mhm.
and because it's I think